Okay. Ready to do this? Okay. So, we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we are going to recreate another artwork by one of my favorite artists. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. A very minor figure in history. His name's Walt Disney. I'll say it one more time, just for those of you that have never heard of this person before. Walt Disney. Okay, everyone got it? Okay, so in all seriousness, Walt Disney is a hugely famous animator, filmmaker, theme park creator, a person who's, you know, toy maker, I mean, fashion designer, I guess you could say. His empire extends basically to every sort of creative medium you can possibly imagine. And today's artwork is probably the least well-known of anything he ever did. This is, we're going to be looking at a character that no one asked for, that is basically unheard of today, but something that has great meaning to me personally, and more specifically to my mother. So when I was visiting my hometown of Calgary earlier this summer, I was talking to my mom, and I was asking her, you know, like, in my mind thinking, like, well, it would be kind of cool to make something that is meaningful specifically to her. I'm thinking, you know, what was a character or book or cartoon or something that was really meaningful to you as a kid? And she's mentioned this before, but I completely forgot about it. It was this character named Bongo the bear. So when she was growing up, there was, I think a couple years before she was born, a film came out called, let's actually let's go right into this here. Fun and Fancy Free. And this is a film, I don't know if she actually has ever seen this film, but she has certainly seen the book. Let me see, where's the, I didn't find the book. I think this looks kind of like the book. Oh, here we are. So obviously this is the image that we're going to be painting today. So this is a book that she had when she was a kid. I think it was inscribed by her grandmother as a gift to her. And I mean, I'm sure if she's watching right now, she can tune in and type some stuff in the comments here. She has no idea that I'm doing this today. This is just something kind of a little fun and special. Again, this will probably be the least viewed video that I do, but again, it's meaningful to me, so I'm gonna do it. Why not, right? So she had this children's book, Bongo, and the original history is actually, if we go back to the very, very beginning of this character, it's based on a book by Sinclair Lewis. Sinclair Lewis was a famous writer during the 1910s, 20s, kind of what would you say, a contemporary of F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ernest Hemingway, kind of similar sort of type of style of writing and the kind of even the themes are very similar. Sinclair Lewis may have been probably one of the more political authors of his time. He's very famous today for, let's see if we just jump really quickly to Sinclair Lewis. He's famous for writing a few books, the most famous of which is It Can't Happen Here, which was a well-selling book at the time. But after Donald Trump was elected, it became the #1 best-selling book on Amazon for a short period of time, because essentially what that book is about is the fascist takeover of the United States, and the idea is, oh, it can't happen here, that's ridiculous. And of course, it's written right as fascism is rising all around the world, including in the United States. If you don't know that history, check it all out. It's disturbing, to say the least. Anyway, Sinclair Lewis created the character. Disney bought the rights to the character, and about 17 years afterwards released this film. This film, Fun and Fancy Free, was sort of done during, I guess it's just after the war years, but because films take a long time to create, what it was a sort of a mishmash of, I think, 2 or 3 different stories, of which Bongo was one of the stories included in this feature-length film, because Disney was, it's during the war, people aren't spending a lot of money, so they're trying to, like, how can we get through this without investing too much extra money? So it was sort of a little bit of a cast-off movie that was just sort of thrown out there. I don't think it had a pretty major cultural impact, and it sort of disappeared. The book, similarly, I've seen, there's a few different versions of this Bongo book, but it is a character that I bet you, well, maybe Disney, being Disney, probably has kept the copyright on it. I think Bongo has made a few appearances subsequently in, actually, I think is it this Disney Wiki? Yeah, a few cameos in Mickey's Christmas Carol, Return of Jafar, which is the Aladdin character, right? So, minor things, right? I guess he sort of appeared at Disney as a character. But probably most kids, most adults walking around Disneyland, if they saw Bongo the Bear, would be like, now, who are you exactly? So anyway, let's jump into this today's episode. So this is the painting that we're going to recreate today. I'm going to try to do this painting as, maybe not as quickly as possible, because it's still a painting. Excuse me. That snuck up on me. This is still a painting class, so not a painting demonstration where I'm going to wow everyone with my speed. So, I'll try to get this painting done in a reasonable amount of time. In about 2 hours, 2.5 hours is my goal for today, which would make it one of the faster paintings that we've done recently. So that's the painting we're going to recreate. Here's the outline that I did. If you want to use the outline, you can download it free. I'll show you where you can get it. There's a link in the description below for a Dropbox folder, and you'll see if you click in there, the Master Study Dropbox folder, you'll see all of these files here. There's the Mona Lisa, Whistler's Mother. Whoa, just suddenly jumped there. I mean, there's tons of stuff. If you're wanting something that's a little bit closer to what we're painting today, because this might be the first time you've ever seen me, hit the like and subscribe while you're doing that if you're new. I've done enough. I did Peppa Pig somewhere in here. I don't know where it is. There's Peppa Pig. We did Superman and Batman and Spider-Man. So some more pop culture kind of things, as of course, like Picasso and Van Gogh, Ted Harrison, Grandma Moses, people that you may or may not be familiar with, but if you're interested in art, I really think you should be, because they are awesome artists. So anyway, I encourage you to click on this link, download the files. You'll see there's 3 files in here. You'll have 2 versions of the outline. One's a JPEG, one's a PDF. They're essentially the same thing, and the original, of course. Now, there is the actual cover of the book has Bongo on the top and says Walt Disney. I just cut this down so that it fits nicely on this size of paper, or canvas, or paper too. You could draw it on paper, paint it on paper. So I'm going to show you how to transfer this image here. I've already done the transfer process, so I'm just going to share my screen here, and let's just sort of take a look at how this is done, because it's pretty straightforward. See, I'm using a 9x12 sized canvas, and I take the image, and then I'm just going to put a little bit of tape down, taping it roughly in the middle. I think, if anything, I gave a little bit more room at the top than the bottom, just so that I often find if I frame things, the frame might come down and then cast a bit of a shadow on the top of the image, which can make it a little bit difficult to, especially if that's the top of somebody's head or hat, it can be a bit of a pain and you don't see it. So here I'm using some carbon paper. You can see that carbon paper has been used quite a lot, so this, I think, is the last time I use it for tracing. But you can buy these carbon paper packs for usually $2 to $4 for 12 sheets. And I've used this same set of carbon paper for the past year, and I still have a couple I haven't even touched. So let's just zoom through here. It's pretty self-explanatory. You could use a ruler for this. I'm just drawing in with a pencil really quickly. And you can see that I've moved the carbon paper kind of diagonally here so that I can just draw the lines right off, because obviously the canvas is a little bit bigger than the photocopy and also of the carbon paper. So there you go, look at that. That's how I can get one line. I mean, obviously I could do this line twice just moving the carbon paper, but it's really satisfying to do it all at once. All right. And almost done. Make that line, Michael. You can do it. Boom. Okay. And then you peel off the tape. I keep that carbon paper and I use it again. So, yeah. There we go. Nice to see. Oh, what's going on here? Oh, we seem to have some weird tech issues every episode. I see Paul is there and Deborah's here in the chat. I'll read some of these in a second once I just get this started. So typically if you're new to the show, what I like to do is start off by taking just some warm yellow and applying it directly onto the or I'm going to move this out of the way. You can keep these, you can use them for testing, for sketching, drawing on, for testing your colors. You could give them to a little kid and they could paint on them like a coloring page. You could download another one and give it to a kid and they could use it as a coloring page. So I'm just putting some of this yellow onto my palette. If you want to know the exact colors that I use, in the description below you can see exactly what they are. And you don't have to use the exact brand that I'm using. In fact, I made a video a year ago showing basically how you can use all of the major paint brands and what paints I suggest you buy for each of those brands of paint. Because when I get the colors out here in a moment, you'll have a pretty clear idea. And I do encourage you to follow my suggestions as closely as possible if you want to get the same results that I am getting. If you're just watching this for the first time and you're after it aired live, then just go right to the end right now. Take a look at where we are in the timeline and go, let's see if this guy knows what he's talking about. And then jump to the end and go, oh. Well, I mean, hopefully you'll go, oh, and not, ooh. But if you go, oh, that's cool, let's make that painting, then come right back, join me here, pick up where you left off, and you'll see kind of how everything makes sense. At least I like to think so. So I'm applying this. You can also see I'm doing it going right to the edges. I like to get the sides of my canvases painted so that I just think it looks really cool later on when they're leaning against the wall and you have a little bit of that yellow coming through. It's kind of evidence that this is a painting. This is not a print. This is not like a photocopy, color photocopy, a photograph. This is a painting that you made, and it's an object. It's an object that you spent hours of your life working on, and I think it's really satisfying because you could see the different layers of paint on the side. I think that's really cool. So, just almost got this finished here. I'll set it to dry. Take a look at some comments. I know this episode's airing at I'm recording this right now at a very unusual time. It's just because I was teaching at Emily Carr, which is a university of art here in Canada, this morning, and I had one-on-one meetings with students, and there wasn't as many people signed up for meetings, so I was stuck around for a while and said, okay, well, if no one wants to meet with me and everyone took off, I'll just go home and start my class a little bit earlier. So that's why I'm here at this slightly odd time painting away. I know it certainly will result in fewer people being here for the live recording, but I don't suspect many people are going to tune in anyway, so... But maybe after they see how it turns out, they'll be like, hey, actually, let's go back and make that painting. So, actually, let's move this here. So let's put some paint on the palette. As always, I like to get all of my paint to fit into a shoebox. Glazing liquid is something that I often use. We'll use a little bit of it. We'll use a little bit of glazing liquid. There was a period of time over the past year where I was doing a lot of glazing, because glazing is the timid painter's tool of choice. If you're new to painting, especially acrylic painting, you're a little bit afraid of making mistakes, glazing fluid is your best friend, because you can just make paint super thin, almost invisible layers and paint with it, and then let it dry, paint another one, and you can very slowly build up color. Incidentally, it's the same way Leonardo da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa. Not that he was a timid painter, but it is a great way of also tapping into the history of painting, at least in the Western world. So I'll do a little bit of glazing today to help get some of the rendering on this image, like the shadows. Let me see as I talk about this. So I'll use a little bit of glazing around on his jacket and on his fur and the wheel. But for the most part, I'm going to try to paint this fairly quickly, and that's going to mean I'm going to be using maybe a little bit more paint than I have at times, because I want to try to fill up the canvas quickly, and so that I'm not doing so many layers of paint. So let's come back here, making a bit of a mess. So generally I don't put this much paint on my palette, but I am because I want to move quick today. I'm not even sure if I'm going to use all of this paint or what colors I'm going to use. I haven't thought that far in advance. So we'll see. If I have a little bit extra and I haven't mixed any color into it, what I'll do is scoop it and put it back into one of these jars, right? So let's say I don't use any of that yellow. I'll just use my palette knife, scoop it back, and put it in here. Obviously, I want to make sure I don't get, you know, if there's a big streak of green in it and I put it back into that container, then I, more likely than not, am going to contaminate that whole container with that other color. And then every time I use it, that yellow is going to be a little bit green, which is a bit of a pain, right? If you don't want that to happen. Okay, so looks like almost dry. One of the reasons why I put white or water into this acrylic is to help speed up the drying process, because that water will evaporate. It'll help the paint evaporate or plasticize a little bit faster. So I'm gonna mute the microphone. What's going on here? And it seems like this cord just got a little shorter. Oh, I know it did get shorter because this extends. I'm like, what is going on, right? Okay, so let's mute. Okay, so let's see, that's a little bright, but once we get some color on it, it will get a little bit darker. Okay, so usually what I like to do is I work from the background to the foreground, and I'll do exactly that with this painting. So meaning I'm going to work with the negative space around Bongo the bear, painting this spotlight here. So there's a yellow and then these blues, and then I'll paint Bongo on top of that area. Okay, so if we look at this image, we've got a cool yellow. So currently we've got a warm yellow that we painted onto the canvas to get started, and that's typically what I do every episode. I did show, I think it was the Thomas Cole Oxbow painting. I did a small version showing the more traditional process, which is to use, I don't know where I put that. Anyway, I painted a warm brown as a ground, or in what we call the imprimatura. I put that, which is the first coat. Typically artists will use a warm brown or a kind of rusty red kind of color to put down over top of just the blank white canvas, and then paint color over it. I just use some warm yellow because the difference is so minor, and between using the warm yellow and mixing a brown or a red, and I think the results are actually, I don't know if they're better, they're just different. I think I prefer it, but anyway, so I'm sure there's some traditional painters who like, you know, I'm sure there's some ancient masters rolling in their graves when they see me do this, but you know, especially for beginner artists, you're not going to notice any difference. So let's begin here with applying some color here. So as I said, this is our warm yellow, but here we've got a cool yellow with some white in it. So let's mix this up and let's paint some cool yellow right over top of it. So I'm going to take a good helping of some white here and some of this cool yellow, and let's mix this together. It's pretty close. I think I'm just going to mix a little bit more paint in here just so I'm sure that I don't paint halfway and then run out of paint. And also, if I have a little bit of this left over and I make a little boo-boo halfway through, I can always go back to the well here, and I've got a color that I used in the painting. That way I don't have to try to mix it again and maybe not do it quite as well, right? So that's why I'm taking a little bit of extra care to mix this in thoroughly. Okay. So I'm going to go over, I'm going to go up to and even a little bit on top of all of these pencil lines. That way, when I paint over them later, it's like I've eliminated the gap between the paint, which you don't have to. Certainly there's a long history of artists who have actually exploited the gap between the paint. The most famous of which would be Matisse, Henri Matisse, the great French master. And we painted Matisse's Goldfish way back in our Intro to Painting class last year. This time last year. Probably almost this exact date last year. And again, if you want to go to that Intro to Painting course, which is here free on YouTube, there's a link to it in the description below. Feel free to check that out. It definitely has some more basic painting information in there. And I'm also going to be redoing that entire course in the new year. So if that's something you're interested in, remember to like and subscribe and stay tuned for that. Join the Facebook group. I didn't even mention the Facebook group. We'll take a look at that shortly. Now, it's hard to know if I've got this color bang on or not, if there's too much white or too much yellow. I'm not sure, because you could see that I didn't really hesitate to start painting. I just was like, let's just throw this in here, because rather than spending all this time trying to get it quote-unquote right, I just want to get it started, and I might find that I've just had beginner's luck and I got the right color right off the gun, but it's also probably more likely that it could use a little bit of nuance, in which case I might have to go back to this area after I get more of the central part of the image painted in here. It's pretty good. It's a little bit patchy in places, which is often why I like to do 2 coats of paint. If anything, and that's one, if you're wondering, I would kind of err on the side of putting a little bit more white in it than you might feel comfortable with, because that white will cover the background a little bit better and, you know, cause less of a streaking than if you, and especially if you're going to put a second coat on there. It's really great for covering things up. Okay, so that's good. I'm just going to take this paint and just kind of move it to the side here, so it's kind of staying in one big clump for now. And in case I want to mix into it, now let's, oops. I'm going to clean this brush. Wow, lots of people joining the chat. Yeah, there's my mom in the chat there. Oh, Michael, Bongo was my favorite book as a child. That's exciting. Hi, Mom. Okay, so let's now move to the colors on the side, or let's look at this angle here. So the colors on the side. That's an interesting color. Look, there's really at least two colors here. It looks like we have, if we zoom, if we zoom in on the painting, got some kind of a cool blue you could see here, and then this kind of stippled, warmer blue on top of it. So let's just follow what Disney did here and do that exact thing. So this will be kind of similar. Let's get a little bit more white on there. So I'm going to take my clean brush. Let's get some white on here and some cold blue. Don't need that much because there's actually not that much space on here. I'm just going to mix it in because I can see the white streaks coming through. So let's take this. And again, I can imagine some people are like, that's not the right color. Well, it's not the right color yet. But this color is there. It's just sort of hidden by another color. And to get the right color, we need this color in there somewhere. And if you tried just to mix this color on its own, you might have a real tough time. I don't know if I'd be able to do it. I mean, I guess I could make a compromise and just paint a dark purpley warm blue, and I'd be pretty close. But since we're learning how to paint, why don't we actually try to do it correctly, right? And I'm just going to paint this side a little bit here. Okay. A nice big long line of paint in here. Oops, let's get this view. Right, so I get paint on my brush. I don't want too much. I don't know how perfect I want to make it, or that I'm willing to... how much time I'm willing to spend here. Ay, ay, ay. Now I just remembered I'm probably going to put another coat of yellow in there, so you know, this is, I'm not sure why I'm spending so much time trying to make that perfect, because when I put that yellow in, it's going to change that line a little bit, right? So that's pretty good for right now. Okay, so I'm just going to wash this brush off. Let's move to the character, or Bongo in the middle, the character in the middle. Lolly was watching some of my older videos where I was doing blind portraits. That's an oldie. That's a gem. Years and years ago. 20 years ago, I think. That. How did I do this here? Let's... So, now I'll let the background dry, these two colors, and then let's move into here. So let's make, so we have, you saw we used two cold colors here. We had a cold yellow around here and a cold blue. And the effect those things are going to have are to kind of push backwards. And conversely, they're going to help, if we paint warm colors on the bear, pop the bear forward, right? Which is generally what you want. 99 times out of 100, you want your subject in the center to be in front of the background. In fact, I'll have to, be interesting. What is an example of an artwork where the background comes in front of the subject? I don't know. I have to think about that. That's a Trivial Pursuit for Artists edition, if they ever made one. That would be a question that no one would. That would stump a lot of us. Okay, so let's mix a warm brown, just like the bear here. So I'm going to start out with a warm yellow. And then I'm going to take some warm red, and we're going to mix those together. We get an orange. I knew you were trying to say bongo and not bingo, Mom. It's probably the autocorrect on the computer, because bongo is not something probably Google has heard. They're like, surely you mean Bingo the bear, right? Okay, so I'm not paying attention. And so the color I've mixed right here is now like a very bluish, greenish brown, like a pretty kind of almost, well, as I mix it in, it's becoming a little bit more of a, but it's still got a kind of a barfy brown quality, right? We want something that's got a little bit more yellow and red into it. So even though I didn't put that much blue in, you saw how it radically changed that color. So making a brown is just yellow, red, and blue. Which combinations and ratios you use will determine the type of brown you ultimately get. So I just put a bit more red in there in order to get a bit more of this warmer, reddish brown. When I saw brown being mixed for the first time, that was like a bit of a revelation for me. It's like, whoa, oh, you don't need to go buy brown? Oh, I thought I didn't realize you could just mix your own brown. Right? And the good thing about mixing all your colors from a limited palette like this is, first of all, it's a lot cheaper, because most of the paints that we're using here, paint companies know they're the most important colors. So they usually make them in larger tubes, and they're less expensive, right? Also because of all of those reasons, right? So you can get more of it for cheaper. And also, all of the colors are going to have a certain unity to them, because you've mixed like I can mix hundreds of millions of colors, billions of colors, if I really want to get into the nuance of it, right? And all of that from just 6 colors. I mean, if you add black and white to it, then that's 8, but it's pretty remarkable. Anyway, let's... this brown, that's pretty good. Do I want it to be a little bit more on the reddish side, though? So let's take a bit more red and just mix this off to the side here. I think I like that. Now, when I paint over top of this warm yellow, I think it's also going to change the color a little bit. Yeah, let's just take this. can see I'm using a big brush. Because if I do a second coat, then I'll go in a little more detail then. Okay, I'm gonna have to go just a little bit smaller here to get into some of these fine details. So let's zoom in. Okay. Actually, let's get some of these little spiky hairs coming up off the top here. Okay, and let's move over to the hand. And we've talked about this kind of thing before. If you find this kind of tricky doing what I just did, which is to just paint right over some of these lines, you might want to think about just outlining them really quickly with a darker color, like a black or a really dark blue perhaps, so that you can see them coming through. See, I'm not worried about being too clean, because I think, anyway, I'm going to put some more yellow back there. Let's do the other hand. And if you're painting with thick enough paint, you may not need to do another coat. We'll see. I'm honestly not exactly sure yet. Okay, moving right along here. I'm going to go back to my larger brush and get this whole area painted. Like, it's so fun to paint with a big brush and just make these big sweeping lines like this. I guess let's and then I just see there's a little the other foot popping out behind here. Now you can see I've sort of just turned these into big paws, where the original has like individual digits. We could do that. I could also do that later on if I want. I think just for right now, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. We'll see how complicated I want to make my life later on, right? Because I tend to always overcomplicate things. So, but for now, I think that's good enough. So do I need to do the background? Another yellow? We'll see here very quickly. We'll see. Little things falling from the sky there, getting it on there. Okay. You know, I'm going to take this brown, even though this is the inside of his jacket. I'm going to put this here anyway. I just want to fill in the painting as quickly as possible. Okay. That's pretty good. Let's just zoom back out. Okay. Just want to go back up to the back here. Deborah said, "My grandkids have been raised on the Russian cartoon Masha and the Bear, which is sort of like Bongo. When my grandkids were toddlers, they loved it. The bear in Masha and the Bear has retired. The bear in Masha and the Bear has retired from the circus and has moved to the country, but meets the lovely little mischievous girl named Masha." That does sound a lot like Bongo the Bear. Bongo the Bear is the circus bear that a few different sort of versions of it basically ends up escaping from the zoo. Either it's like a mishap, or he does it himself, but like there's an accident and the cage breaks and he escapes and runs into the wilderness, and of course he's a little bit terrified because now he's on his own, and falls in love with this beautiful girl called was it Lulubelle, I think. Another bear, a little female bear, and then, you know, he's madly in love with her, but it turns out, of course, she's in love with or not in love, but her fiance is the meanest, ugliest, rudest bear of all, and he's terrorizing the forest. So then I think Bongo, if I recall, just sort of like, he's like, okay, I think he sort of wants to get out of the situation, but sort of inadvertently keeps making matters worse. And this what's his name, the lumpjack or something is the bad bear's name, chases after him. There's a kind of a confrontation above a waterfall, and Bongo uses his technique of the tight wire act to escape over top of the waterfall while the evil bear falls into the river below. And Bongo is treated as a hero because now he's chased away the evil bear. Everyone in the forest loves him, and he gets the girl. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, if that's the story, but I think that's. It is interesting when you like Sinclair Lewis being a fairly political person and author. There's, you know, a subtext to that story of, you know, being kind of a little bit like Plato's cave kind of thing, of being trapped and not really knowing that there's an outside world, and then you find yourself in the outside world and you almost want to be back in the cage because it's scary having that freedom all of a sudden, but he then realizes the opportunity and then takes advantage of that opportunity. And I think that's Sinclair Lewis also making just a comment. Remember, this is the guy just a few years later writes It Can't Happen Here about fascism. I think he's saying, like, you know, we should, if we have the opportunity to, we should appreciate freedom when we have it, because it can be taken from us at any moment. And you could end up back in the cage or worse, right? Okay, what was I going to do? I was going to get some more white here. And I'll get to some other questions here in a moment. So what I'm going to do is I want to mix this color on Bongo's face, and then we'll do his belly. Let's start with his face. So I'm taking a little bit of white. Let's mix a bit of this in here. And I'm going to take some yellow. That's pretty close. We could go for more nuance, but especially if I don't know, but I may do another coat of this, so I'm just going to apply it. Oops, how did I get... The last second, I got some other color on there, so let's... Sometimes that happens, you're like, you got the color all mixed, and then you take one last swipe and you get a bunch of other color on there you don't want, but... So I think I do want a lighter color, but this is okay for right now. See, I'm just sort of painting into the nose there. I'll take care of all that later. Anywhere else? I thought I was going to need more of this somewhere, but I guess not. We'll see. So let's just put that to the side and clean the brush, and maybe let's take... Looks like we got a bit of a pink belly here. But let's also put just a bit of brown in there too, so it's not just total pink. There we go. Okay. Not showing up too well on camera. In fact, you know what? I'm going to take this same color, since I've got a bunch of it mixed. I'm just going to paint it where the red is ultimately going to go elsewhere. It's going to help me get a nice, rich, bright red. Maybe I'll add just a bit more white in here onto the jacket. Let's zoom in here so you can see a little bit closer. You know what? I'm just going to paint right over that stripe, because it's so much easier to do it this way than it is to fiddle. As you know, I'm always like, what is the fastest way that will ideally also yield the best results? And sometimes the fastest way will also yield the best results. Not always. And if I can do it a little bit faster, I will do it a little bit faster. Right? It's going to take this same dark color I had earlier. Paint the inside of his jacket. I didn't notice that. Okay, moving right along. I might just paint this hat the same bit of a pink. Since I mixed it up, this will look a little bit better. Okay. And we got a little bit of this. So the reason why I'm painting a pink here, and you could certainly leave it pink, there's nothing wrong with pink, I love the color pink. It's just that if you want it to be red, if I just paint warm red over top of this yellow, it's going to look like really dark brown. Like it's not going to have the same kind of bright candy fire engine red that I might ultimately want. So that's, again, part of the painting process is you don't always paint the color you want when you first paint, because the color you want doesn't necessarily appear on the canvas, right? That's the kind of the frustrating thing and the magic too of painting. Actually, let's get inside his mouth here. Just taking that little bit of a texture, that ridge out. Okay. Thank you everyone for all the likes on the video. That's great. So I'm just going to take some white and just going to paint some white into these eyes. You can see I was a little bit sloppy and I got a little bit of white, or sort of brown where I didn't want it. That's okay. Maybe I will just do one coat here. We'll see. Let's take this white. I'm going to put it in the collar. And oh, that's black, that's blue. We got almost everything covered here except maybe the wheel at the bottom. So to do that wheel, let's get another brush. What I'm going to do to let's zoom back out. To get a gray, I'm going to take some cool blue. Let's mix it down here. Cool blue and warm red together. And I mix this together and I get this really, really dark color, which I can also use for parts of the body. Let's say eyes and mouths. This would be a great color for outlining. And this is also a great color for maybe early in the painting for doing a couple little details. The nose, I can use all of this color for that. I'm going to make it go a little bit more gray, because at the moment it's got a bit of a purple to it. Adding a little bit of yellow will lighten it up just a bit. Now I got this. I could still use this color for the face, or the eyes and nose, etc. Let's take a bit of white and mix it off here to the side, and you can see we've got a gray. Now it's a bit of a purpley gray, so let's add a bit of yellow to it. Now it's a bit of a yellowy gray, but if we mix some of that paint back there, it's going to kill that yellow. And now we're just left with a gray. I love it. Again, just like how making brown is a bit of a mind explosion when you do it the first time, making a gray for the first time is like pretty exciting, because you certainly don't look at those colors and think, well, there's going to be gray there. Your expectation might be, well, I suppose if I just mix it all together, it's going to turn into a big muddy brown, and you're not too far off. But the first time I learned that, was like, whoa, that's pretty cool. So let's paint this wheel in here with gray. I don't know, do I need to do the, oops, I didn't see this is, I don't know if I'm gonna paint the back, well, sometimes it's so hard to tell. I think it would probably benefit from the yellow in the background being just a bit more saturated. So I think I will add some cool yellow back on top. So if there's one place that I tend to kind of fidget for a while, it's like circles. Because it's one of those things that, like, it can drive me crazy, and later on when I'm looking at the painting, like, I want to take this downstairs and fix it. It's pretty good for right now. The reason why sometimes you see me brushing my finger into the paint and I'm pushing it inward is sometimes I get a little ridge of paint, and I don't really usually like those ridges because they often catch the light and can look like a mistake later on, or it can look like a black or a white when in fact it's just a highlight or a shadow because of the light hitting it in a certain way. And I generally don't like that, so I like to try to wipe it away with my finger, and I wipe back into the color so that I'm not smudging it onto another shape or color, right? Maybe let's put some let's put a little bit of this dark color on the face here. So I'm just going to take a smaller brush. Let's zoom in. Because what do you think? Should we... do another coat of paint on him? So I'm just going to put this in real quick as just a placeholder. I typically don't do this until later on, but I know that especially if you're younger or you're just beginning, having a little bit of the details in a face can be just some comfort, I suppose, because it can feel a little bit overwhelming looking at a painting that appears very unfinished. It can kind of just be like, oh, I don't know where this is going. I just feel like I've just gone off the cliff. So I'm not going to go too much further than that right now, but I think that probably might alleviate a little bit of anxiety. It's interesting, now I look at this is a green. I thought that was just a pure blue when we were zoomed out. So let's make a green and paint that in this area. It's not a big space, so we don't need to mix too much of it. And I'm gonna make, let's just take some of this cold yellow that we use for the background and take a little bit of cold blue. Let's just take this, mix this together here. Not exactly the right color. There's probably a little bit too much yellow or white in this mixture. But I promise you that you won't get in trouble. No one's going to kick the door down. There's no art police that are going to arrest you for using too much or too little of any color, right? And I'm just thinking, while I've got this color kind of mixed, why don't we just put it down by the wheel down here as well. We'll just recycle these colors. I like doing this, even if ultimately this color is going to be a little bit different. You can kind of, we can leave it kind of green like this, or we can modify it, but at least it's not just empty, right? There's something there. I didn't realize this was going to be a little bit darker, so let's make it a little, take some of our darker gray before I added more white to it. I'm just gonna take this darker color, same color I just put in the eyes, and let's just throw this right here. Oh, there's a little bit of brown there I didn't see. Right, sometimes you get into the details, you start seeing more and more. Oops, not gray, I want brown. Michael, which is my brown? Okay. Cool. Let's zip back out. We look at this painting. Let's go a little further. So this is, you know, if you wanted to take a break for today because you felt like, whew, that was a lot, this would be a great place to take a break. This is what we would consider your underpainting. Right, the painting that exists underneath the finished painting. And the reason artists make an underpainting is it helps kind of just establish, gets the composition sorted, figures out where everything's got to go. It's a great way to sort of test out colors. Like, you might, as you're underpainting, you might paint this, let's say the sides here cold blue, and then you go like, you know what? Kind of feel like maybe it should be green, right? And it's like, okay, well, let's paint it green, because now you have a better idea of how things look. The underpainting is to help you solve some problems, to quickly establish the composition and the basic color choices. So if you're happy with the way things are going, then you can keep on going. You can modify it. Often, like I've done, is, let's say on the blue here, is I know this is going to get darker, but I want a little bit of this cool blue kind of underneath. What's a way to think about it? You know, it's sort of, this is like the pizza sauce underneath the cheese, right? It's like, you might not necessarily even know it's there. You might see a little bit of it peeking through the cheese, but when you bite into the pizza slice, you're like, oh, it's a tangy tomato or pesto or something, right? So it's may not be overtly visible, but it's there under the surface or poking through, just like in this, right? Especially we could see this little halo here and a bit here. So, and I think it's going to make the eventual color we put over top of here even richer. Okay, so you know, now that I'm looking at this painting, I'm happy that I used this cool yellow. I think I could probably get away with it as it is, But why not? I'm going to put a little bit of cool yellow back around here. And you can see that there's a bit of a halo around everything, which could make things a little bit easier. In fact, why don't we do that? Why don't we follow the image pretty closely? Because again, maybe I'll just zoom in. Do you see how there's this little white halo around everything here? Now, we could do this by, there's lots of different ways that we could go about doing this. I'm going to probably just take the fastest, easiest choice here, which is to paint the yellow and just leave a little bit of this color around. But we could paint right up to it and then glaze some yellow around there, or we could do very thin glaze. I mean, because there is a bit of a fade out effect happening here. But I think I'm gonna take the easy way out. I'm just thinking though, before I go too much further, it might be wise to draw this line back here again. So where did this guy go? Somewhere like... Now I could paint this. It's a little bit... It's not quite perfect down here, but I think that's going to be fine. I just wanted... Sometimes those lines disappear, and if you're just doing a little extra line every once in a while to bring it back, that can be really helpful. Same sort of thing, let's say, if you've lost a few details in the face. Like, don't be afraid to do any of this stuff. Okay, I think this is a time for some tea. Also, since I don't think I mentioned it, there is the private Facebook group just for people that are painting along, and I strongly encourage you to, after today's episode, take a photograph, upload it to the Facebook group, and that way we can all see what you've accomplished. And wow, that's cool. Charmé. Did you... So you say after Matthew Wong's Blue Dream. I'm not aware of this painting by him, so I don't know if this is something you were inspired to do after Matthew Wong. We did a couple of paintings by Matthew Wong a few weeks ago. That's awesome. Here's May's version of the Lydia Clark. Awesome. I love that one. It turned out really good. Heidi doing some drip painting. Awesome. We're going to be doing some Jackson Pollocks in the new year. I know it seems like a long ways away, but it comes up pretty quick. And look at that, Paula's version of the Tamara de Lampica. Oh, look at this. Got a few friends came for a ride. So that's awesome. Here's the Diego Rivera's to the boy and the girl. That's so awesome. I love that they're in the car with her, right? So anyway, whoa, that is cool too. Look at Maria. This is the Tamara Lampica painting we did. Two very different interpretations of the same painting. Anyway, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be taking a look at all of those awesome artworks. So again, join the Facebook group. Even if you're not painting something we're doing in class, I'd love to see it and offer you some feedback if you are open to receiving some feedback. Not everybody is, and I know that there's often hundreds of people who are watching and painting along with me, but you know, it's usually about 5 to 10 people will send their artwork in. You know, I've seen a few people have said like, oh, I've been watching since back in last year, painting along, but I didn't feel confident enough to share my work, and now I keep on painting, and now I'm feeling more like I've got it, and now I'm ready to share it. That is also really exciting, right? Because that takes a lot of courage just to keep on going if you're not feeling like you're achieving what you really want. Okay, so let's back to business here. I'm taking some cool yellow right out of the tube, and I'm going to paint it in here, again, trying to keep a bit of a halo around here. All right, and then I think a little bit of this halo. To do this, I'm going to kind of almost like dry brush, right? So I paint big, thick brush strokes, and then as I get closer, this is after there's less paint on my brush. It's kind of thinning out. That way I can get a little bit of that faded quality. So I'm trying to avoid some really hard edge. Let's maybe it'd be helpful to zoom in. I'm not sure how well that's going to show up on camera because we're painting two similar yellows. Really, this is the exact same yellow, just one has some white in it, one doesn't. But the effect is pretty nice. It does look like this weird kind of glowing effect that it gives the bear, which is kind of what we want, right? We want this bear he's in his circus mode on the tight wire act at the top of the circus tent, above the crowd. You can see we've nailed the color too, so as I suspected, this is what we wanted. I know if you're like a beginner artist, I can imagine you see what I'm doing and like, how do you do that? That's like, how do you sort of guess the colors and guess them right most of the time? Not all the time. There's times where I'm a little bit off for sure, and it's just practice. You know, it's literally just painting a lot, challenging yourself, like I'm challenging myself to do all of this, right? And slowly become more and more accurate. There's no real secret to it. And that's why doing lots of painting, I think, is better than doing one perfect painting. I'm always encouraging my students to work faster and to do more, so worry about quantity over quality when you're in school. When you're in school, to do that. Because you'll move through ideas faster, and you can even improve faster because you're making lots of mistakes, but you're also learning how to fix those mistakes in the next painting that you make. Yeah, so I don't know if you can see any of this on camera. It's going to be super subtle. Now I kind of left a little bit of, actually there's a bit of a halo between these colors, but I'm just going to take the yellow right up to or almost over top, or not over top because that will make it go a little bit green, but we're pretty much right up to the blue here. And if there's a little bit of white showing, then so be it. Alright, let's do the other side here. Like if you do get a little bit of this yellow on the blue, it might make the blue go just a bit green. Right, because yellow on top of blue will, if we mix it, it will go green, and it will mix optically in our minds. So let's zoom back out. Just see how that turned out. Look at that, getting there, one step of the way. If I wanted to do an even better job, I think I probably could have added more white into the yellow background that I painted. Or, you know, I think was that my first thing that I did? We're pretty close thereupon, right? But I think that's pretty good. Right? And you can always do this painting over again. Wow, there are lots of comments in here. I was having a conversation with my mom in the chat. That's great. That's funny. Okay. So I'm just gonna... I've been just using like old towels. Drives my wife crazy because every time she tries to throw things out, I like go through it and try to find... I'm like, oh, I could use this as a painting rag. And... you know, here's an old towel that instead was going to go in the garbage, and I cut it up into like 6 towels, which are perfect size because I can use the same one and just kind of, I've got it clamped to my desk, and I just wipe my paintbrush right off on there. That way I don't have a wet rag with wet paint sitting on my table. Which, you know, if I didn't have this, and I should try to I could do a video where my ideal setup if I was painting in my kitchen. Because if I was painting in my kitchen, I would probably have like a little Tupperware container with a rag in it that could just sort of sit there, not wet, but just that way I can wipe my paintbrush off and put it in the Tupperware container, and at the end of my cleaning session, I can just take that Tupperware container, dump the rag out in the garbage, but at least it's not like just tossed onto the table and all that kind of stuff. I do think a lot about keeping clean while I'm working, because I don't know about you guys, but if I've got a lot of clutter, and I know there's clutter everywhere, my wife would probably laugh about that, but if there's a lot of clutter, especially right in my workspace, in where I'm looking, I find it really distracting, even to mix colors, right? If you've got a ton of weird colors all over the place, and you're trying to mix a color, those colors are coming into your vision from the sides, and they're going to influence the color you make. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. Let's move on. I think it probably would be helpful for us now to paint the red in here, so you could see that I didn't have a aneurysm and I lost my mind and painted everything pink when it should be red. So let's just take some warm red right out of the tube. And let's zoom in. Let's do the jacket here first. Okay, that's nice. As we start putting this in, it's like the paint, what's nice about painting sometimes is it goes through these phases of just feeling like a total car wreck to all of a sudden feeling like, you know, it's turning into something special. And sometimes it's just like 1 or 2 little brush strokes, you're like, oh, I see it now, right? Like that, all of a sudden, for me anyway, that big bright red just gives me the sense that the painting is sort of coming into focus. Now, yes, there are some of these yellow stripes on the gloves, or not the gloves, on the sleeves, I mean, and we'll paint those afterwards. You'll see why I sort of skipped over that, because this just goes so much faster. Like whenever I'm faced with details like that, I think to myself, is there a way that I can basically cover up that detail and then recover it later, like, or uncover, not uncover it, but paint it back in over top later. because otherwise I'm going to be sitting here painting around this little detail all afternoon, and usually that does not look good. I mean, if you do a really good job of it, it can look fantastic, but often it shows all the hallmarks of fiddling because there's broken fiddle strings everywhere. I mean, the little tiny, like, generally you want the painting to look like it was kind of done effortlessly, right? And that's one of the things, like, often people will make jokes about modern art and they'll say, oh, it looks like my kid could do it. And as much as that is kind of intended to be a bit of an insult towards modernist painters like Picasso or Matisse, Frida Kahlo, etc., Jackson Pollock, oh, just a bunch of splatters. It's also something, oddly enough, that artists will strive for, because they want you to think that it was very effortless. Because you generally don't, well, I mean, I was going to say, generally you kind of don't want it to look like it was labored over and it was like an exhausting, difficult painting to make. Because that's no fun. It's you want it to just feel like it's light and spontaneous, like a magic trick. You know, if you went to a magic show and the magician's like, okay, I'm going to make this my model disappear. And you're like, okay, awesome. And they're going to be like, it's going to take me 4 hours. So everyone just stay patient. Go to the salad bar, go get some food, and slowly my model will disappear. It's like, okay, well, I mean, it'll be amazing, but like 4 hours, jeez. I mean, by the time, I'll probably disappear by the time the model disappears. I'll be headed home and sitting on the couch. Right, so sometimes you want it to kind of feel like it was easy. As much as some people will ridicule the painting for it, people who will want that feeling of like, boom. And artists work really hard to get it. Like Henri Matisse, or Henry Matisse, if you need to anglicize it, Henri Matisse, he would deliberately, he was an oil painter. So this goes in, this is an acrylic painting class, but what he would do is keep the paint really wet. You could kind of do this as an acrylic painting if you kept it in a very humid thing. We talked about using like a box like this with a sponge inside, right? If I took this and I put you get this wet and you close the lid, and let's say you put your painting inside there, the painting could stay wet for years. I mean, it would probably get moldy, but it could stay a little bit more wet. Acrylic, well, I don't know. I have to think. I've never thought about doing that, so it probably wouldn't work. But Matisse, anyway, would continually keep his oil paints wet, and he might paint on it for weeks because he wanted to look like he did it in 20 minutes. Like, bop, 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 bop. Right? People are like, wow, how did you? When you did it so quickly and so masterfully. Oh, yes, yes. But in truth, he would labor over it and make, do and spend all this time, but he wanted people to, because it makes you look like a genius and a master if it appears to have been done in a couple of quick brushstrokes as opposed to being worked over for hours and hours and hours. Okay. I always think to myself, sometimes the length of these videos is not reflective of how much time I was actually painting. So I think let's do the side here. So the sides are, there might be a bit of purple in it, or it might be just pure warm blue. There's a bit of, it's almost a tiny bit of a navy. I think, let's just take the, just for simplicity's sake, rather than trying to mix colors, let's just take this. Now, I'm going to bet a few dollars that it's going to be a little bit streaky in here, as warm blue can be. So, I'm going to leave a little bit of that cold blue. Little tiny edge. Go like that. I'm just going to let that dry, and then I might go back over it maybe with a darker color. But I kind of like, just for right now, I kind of like it. Now, you could also kind of do a little bit more of a textured version. But I think well, we'll see. Maybe I'll do a textured version. I don't know. I'm kind of just pretty happy with this as it is, but keeps sort of getting wider and wider by the time I get to the bottom. I'm just getting more paint on my brush just to kind of go back over one more time, so I'm not scraping paint off, I'm adding paint. Okay, it definitely could be much darker. So let's let that dry, and then we'll maybe put some more warm blue over top of it. And I'll debate, I could use a sponge effect. There's lots of different ways we could tackle that, but I think we'll just hold off for a moment and let that settle. My goodness. Yeah, my mom's having quite the conversation with everyone here. I haven't even looked at. Okay. So again, always just trying to keep my brushes relatively clean, so they're not just sitting there on the table hardening and getting ruined. What should we do now? Really the question I have for myself at this point is, do I want to go over the brown? Maybe let's take this, we'll mix a little bit more brown. So I'm going to take my Need some more warm yellow. Sorry, ooh, that was... Ooh, made me feel like I indigestion when Okay. I think I did a pretty good job of mixing that color originally. So, we're taking it into this. Yeah, it's pretty good. Maybe this is a bit more red. If it's too red, is that just a little bit of warm blue in here, and it'll take it back down to from orange to brown. So you can see when I add a second, in fact, let's zoom in here. I think you'll see the difference is pretty, you know, easily observed. It just gives it a much more solid type of quality, which is not always desired. Sometimes you want a little bit more of transparency. So, and I think just the more you paint, the more you realize, you know, what different like layering colors can do. And looks like I got okay, good. It just becomes part of your toolbox, and you decide when to deploy it or when to use it or when not to use it. So does this add more time onto the painting? For sure. I was going to try to do this one a little bit faster and more with thicker paint, but you know, if you're working if you're working quickly, or you're working with thick paints, you're painting with a child, you can easily just sort of kind of skip this step if you want. This is mostly just because I'm cursed to being a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to making art. And sometimes that means spending longer on things than one needs to. Now, there's still a little bit transparent in there. I think when it dries, it'll look a little bit better. And of course, we're going to be putting some glazes over, just I think one little quick glaze to add some shadow. And that will probably clean up any thin parts of the paint. Let's switch to the slightly larger brush. The other thing about having an underpainting that is nice is even if you do intend to get kind of thick with the paint later on, it actually makes it easier to do that, because now you've got like a base layer established, and it can kind of give you freedom to be a little bit wilder on that second layer of paint. Because you're not afraid there's going to be kind of spots that are going to be left uncovered. Everything's been covered, so you know, to go back to a food analogy, it's sort of like if you're having like a 4-cheese pizza or something, right? If there's cheese all over the whole pizza, and you're just adding more cheese to it, well, then at least there's cheese there. It's not going to be like there's going to be a bite that won't have cheese in it. I don't know. I don't know if that analogy makes sense. And I'm a little bit hungry. I left the house this morning, 7:30. I had a snack at like 10 between classes, and then I had meetings during lunch. So then I raced home so I could get this started so that I wouldn't be painting too late after I got home, so I could help with being with the family. So you can see this is sort of now going over a third coat really quickly just to kind of clean up some of those areas that seemed a little bit thin. Now I could have left it because there is a bit of that thinness that it is, you can actually kind of see it being utilized in the original. Like, I think I might keep, now this might not need any work. In fact, I could probably just glaze a little bit of the highlights on it and it'll be fine. Anyway, there's always a little bit of coulda, shoulda, woulda for every painting you make, right? So, what's next? So there's all these, everyone's having conversations about grandkids, etc. I'll just leave that and just jump over here. Lolly says, Michael, I know we've mentioned using oil paint. I think the solvents and ventilation and stuff are off-putting for me, although I might, is that what ATM means? But I still like the effect. Would oil pastels offer some kind of effect as far as being blendable, easier to blend than acrylics? Oil pastels don't blend that well. It's not like, yeah, they're pretty, you can kind of smudge them a little bit, but they don't really blend. I mean, I guess if you, chalk pastels blend very easily. Oil pastels less so. I think you could do 90% of what oil paints can do with, you can do most of that with acrylic. And I would say, you know, another way of thinking about oil and acrylic, I'm always, you notice I'm lots of analogies. Another way to think of like the difference between acrylic and oil is a standard transmission and an automatic transmission in a car. Acrylic is a lot more like automatic transmission, right? You can just sort of take it out, anybody can use it. There's like very little sort of learning curve to get going. Oil paint, on the other hand, is a lot, again, like an automatic, or sorry, manual transmission, which if you've ever driven one of those, takes, you know, there's a lot of lurching and shifting and grinding of gears, and the person whose car it is like, ooh, that's, you're taking a year off my gearbox there. Right? Like, oh, you just make sure your foot's on that clutch. So there is a lot more difficulty just getting up to speed, I guess. But once you've got it, it's really fun because you have a little bit more flexibility, mostly in the fact that the paint stays open or wet longer. Some people love that, some people don't like that aspect of oil painting. Anyway, I want to get I guess we're not that far from being done. Like, And I should say that every time I say that I get myself into trouble, but really, I mean, we could be done here in 5 minutes. I could just add a little bit of outlining to a few places and boom, we'd be done. And that would be, I'm sure most people would be more than happy with that. Where is it that I want to, if we look at the original, and then all of a sudden you look at the original, oh my gosh, there's lots to do. But really, we can do a bunch of this with just a darker glaze. And I think we'll do that. We'll just kind of really quickly lay in some of these shadows all over the place. And then we can do the opposite, go with some highlights, boom, 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 on the knees, the ears, boom, 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 that's done. A little bit of highlights on here, and that's done. So, and then the sides, it's funny, on camera, it looks very different than it does here in person. I think what I'll do is make this a darker blue here shortly. So I think actually the best thing is just to blow dry everything. Kind of help, got a lot of wet paint on here, and that will make a big difference. So let's just mute this. Okay, so let's start tightening this up and getting it closer to where we want it to be. So, you know, and for many people, this is more that they're more than happy to leave the painting at this stage. But I think even just with a little bit more, if you outline a little bit here, and you can use the paintbrush to outline, you can also use like acrylic paint pens to do some fine outlining. I will say I've been using these a little bit recently. Ultimately, if I can paint it with a paintbrush, no question, that's what I would do. Because first of all, I don't like the fact that I have to use the color that I'm given. I want more flexibility. Now, Posco does make, or Uni Posco is the brand. They do make one that you can put paint in. You can, and it's like you can clean it, and it's like a refillable paint pen. They do have one like that, and so you can. But for me, it's just like a lot of work and cleaning and maintaining. Like, so. And the other thing too, I find they're a little bit glossy, and as you probably know, you've heard me say, I much prefer matte paint than glossy paint. I don't mind if, like, for instance, I wouldn't be bothered if I painted everything in matte and then put a glossy varnish over it, but I just don't like, in total personal preference, I just prefer matte. The glossy, especially when I'm painting, I find it's a little bit, having some parts that are shiny versus it is distracting to me. It can also be a little distracting to match color when something is kind of reflecting light and could be picking up light from other places in the room. Anyway, blah 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 blah. Let's get here. Which color should I use? Let's do... I don't think we got to go too much darker with that brown. So we could... I'm just thinking out loud to myself. Let's mix this brown again. I'm just going to mix more of it. So it goes kind of orangey. That's not bad for highlights. So that's why I like mixing a bit of larger amounts, is that I can take a bit of this and use this also for my highlight. So maybe let's just move this guy off to the side. And then we'll darken this one. So this is pretty close to my original color that I applied everywhere here on the bear. But let's take it and... I'm just gonna... let's do this over here. So I'm gonna take some of the cold blue and mix this into here. And you can see how it's sort of going a bit of that gray, right? Because they're crossing over top of the neutral core. Let's take a bit of that. Let's take a bit more warm blue. A bit more warm red. I mean, the other, what I could have just done is just mixed a dark color and added it to the brown. So this is sort of like maybe a little bit of the same thing, just maybe a bit more of a confusing way of going about it. But so I've got this color now that's a dark, a really pretty, not the darkest brown that I can make, but dark enough. And I'm going to glaze with this. So I'm just, let's get the extra off. And let's use a smaller brush. So here's, now I'm going to use my glazing fluid. Give it a good shake. Where should we do, whoa. Sometimes you gotta be careful, just spat out at me there. So I'm going to take some glazing fluid, get it on my brush, because that's what I want, more glazing fluid than paint. That's why I'm going to glaze with it. Let's get some paint in here. And this is why I say the glaze is like the timid painter's dream, because you can just add a tiny bit of color to the glaze and you can paint with it, and barely, you can notice barely anything, barely, like small infinitesimal changes. And if it's not enough, then you just add a little bit more. Not enough, to add a little bit more, do another layer. So let's see, I can see it, but let's add a little bit more so it's not quite as dark as I want it to be. So I think this is probably, I'm taking a big leap forward. There's a lot more paint on here. So we'll see, maybe this is too much. And then I gotta add more glazing fluid to it. That's not bad. So how about let's zoom in here. Sometimes you just gotta let it dry and then come back to it. Let's do here. We'll let it dry, and we can always do more layers shortly. So you can't see, I'm overworking it a bit, so I just let that dry and then we'll come back. I'm always doing that just because I'm kind of impatient, but let's do the hand here. Don't be afraid, don't worry that it's a little bit darker than maybe we wanted it to be. You can even take this and do some of the jacket. I'm using the brown on the jacket because there's a lot of red in here. This might not be the color you'd want to use on our blue surface, but okay. Top of this leg. There. If you're worried it's a little too dark, that's okay, because we can always lighten it up with subsequent layers, right? Here's the other leg on the opposite side, so we're going to get this darker here. And then down here in the feet. Some of that will come through more as a highlight than as a shadow. And the other hand here. In fact, let's get this jacket. Oh, I forgot to put the yellow stripe on the jacket. We'll get there in a second. Okay, so I think what I'll do now is a quick, or actually I wonder if I can get away with this brown. Yeah, let's put a bit of this brown here. It's a little dark for this part, but it's okay. I just wanted to go to get rid of the light color in here, so that's why I was a little bit hesitant, but okay. Just gonna quickly continue to darken. Now, ideally, I'd blow dry a bunch of this just to make sure that it's set, but because I'm always so impatient, I always just do this and then regret it later, and then spend an extra 20 minutes fixing things, but it looked like that was okay. Okay, that's not bad. Okay, so let's zoom back out, take another look. You can see all of a sudden, whoa, look, we got a lot more dimension on here. And especially once we start putting some of these lines on the, it'll be like all of a sudden just pop right into focus. So have no fear if you're still like, it still looks a little something something. We'll get there. We'll get there. Maybe even taking a bit of this darker color, as I just kind of notice it might be kind of just do just making sure it's still bear-like, right? There's a little bit of fur there. I think we'll get this as a highlight down there. It's a little subtle. Maybe I'll take a brown that I had, rather than doing this as a glaze. The way I should have done it originally. So I guess it's kind of expanded his head there just a little bit, not too far off of the original. Looks like I'll have to massage this a little bit. Okay, so getting there. Lolly says, which artist or movement has had the biggest impact or inspired you during your time as an artist? A lot of different people. I saw my mom earlier talking about my aunt. My aunt certainly was a huge influence. She is a illustrator, so that was really inspiring, seeing somebody who is making art and could make a small living at it. I thought that was really inspiring. But in terms of people you might know, things like I've always been really interested in like the early avant-garde painters like Picasso, like Matisse. A movement called the Futurist movement. We haven't looked at any Futurist painters, Cubist painters, Fauvist painters, of which Matisse was a Fauvist painter. I've always been attracted to that early 20th century, and we have looked at a number of them throughout these episodes, painters from about this time 100 years ago, where there was a lot of excitement in art of the possibility that was available to artists because of the advent of photography. Like, if you think of the for artists, at least at first, the camera was devastating. For painters and drawers and illustrators, all of a sudden you had a tool that could do what artists were trying to do. Artists might spend months making a painting that looked like the coronation of a king or queen, and suddenly a photographer could come in, set up a tripod, take a photograph, go back to the studio, expose it on a plate, and it would be ready to be printed in the evening edition of the newspaper. And artists are like, oh, what? Like, that put a bunch of artists out of business. You know, it's sort of like the whaling industry, you know, depended on, you know, like electricity basically put the whaling industry out of business, because now you didn't need whale blubber to burn in lanterns on street corners anymore. Like, boom, all of a sudden the industry's over. So that threw art into chaos for a couple of decades. But quickly a lot of artists realized, wait a second, we don't have to paint what we see anymore. We can paint what we imagine. Whoa, like, think of all the new opportunities. We can make surrealist paintings, which are impossible. So instead of being frustrated that we can't paint the possible, now we have freedom to paint the impossible, to paint what we feel, things that a camera can't capture. And all of a sudden, that's like, there's this incredible excitement in art of all the possibilities. And everyone's trying all these different kinds of things. I've always been attracted to that, because I always thought it was like, what an exciting time to be an artist. And there was this real hope and optimism that art could change the world, and I think it has. But I think people were living in a much more cynical time these days, where people are like, yeah, I don't know. Even artists themselves are like, yeah, it'd be nice, but I don't really know if I'm going to make a painting that's going to change somebody's vote, or that's going to do all sorts of other things and get rid of racism and stuff. But you never know. You never know. I think if that's partly what I'm trying to do, is maybe expose people to art from around the world, and maybe people who might have been a little bit more close-minded after they've been painting art from the great masters from China and India and Pakistan and elsewhere around the world, are like, huh, actually there's some people that don't look like me, that maybe there's really great people from all over the world. I'm not saying anybody watching right now thinks that, but that's in the back of my mind, is like, I think there's all these great artists from all over the world. How can I let people know about them, right? Let's make paintings by them, right? Literally walk a little bit in their footsteps, and we'll get a little bit more appreciation for them. Hope that answers your question. Lolly says he's really taking shape now. Little Bongo the bear. I'd never heard of Bongo till today. I guess I've been missing out. Now that you know about him, it's not like there's a lot of Bongo content out there. Maybe we'll create the Bongo Renaissance here together, and be part of we'll pick it to Disney, or encourage them to pick this character up and make it a central character again. I don't think that'll happen, but I always learn a bunch of art history stuff in these streams. So grateful for these lessons. Where were you when I was at school? I don't know. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I just spent the whole day teaching students at university, and there's a few of them that are falling asleep in class. So, you know, maybe it's just like after you get out of school, you're like, oh, maybe I should have been awake more often. Not saying that you were. I certainly took some naps during class, especially those art history classes where you're like in the back of the giant auditorium, like, they won't be able to see me with my eyes. I'll just put my sunglasses on, or be really pretending to, and then somebody starts snoring, and you're like, pretty hard to get away with that. Anyway, let's progress. Okay, so let's, I set this, if you remember, a while ago, this color, I set it aside, which is basically just warm yellow and warm red. I think there was a bit of white in here that got in there. That's all right, because what I want to do is make a highlight anyway. So we're going to glaze with this. I think I'd just make it a bit more white, so let's add a bit more white paint to it. Let's add a bit more yellow to it as well. That'll be nice. In fact, that's good, but I feel almost like too much white in there. So let's just, I think, a bit more of a yellowy highlight. Yellowy brown as opposed to kind of a pastel-y brown. I think, for me, might be kind of satisfying. So that's the color that I'm going to go with. Squeeze off the extra and clean my brush. I'm not going to put any water on it. I'm just going to now take glazing fluid. Oops. Just get this in here. I'll probably use a smaller brush for this, for these highlights. Okay, so let's zoom back in. Where should we start? So it looks like from in this painting we have the light kind of coming in from the top left, right, pointing inward. That way you can see here we've got the highlights on the top of the ears, top of the head, right up here. So, and the reason I'm also using a smaller brush is in hopes of just giving it a bit more of a hair-like quality. So that's not nearly enough, so I'm just getting a little bit more on my brush, and that might be a little too much, but that's okay. I can always take it and I can blend it out. I can use my mop brush. I'm just going to soften that a bit. So some of these lines look pretty dramatic right now. I have a feeling that they're going to sort of lose some of their intensity as the color dries a little bit. So I'm just going to keep on moving forward here. Little bit of interesting little reflection under here, which makes some sense, bouncing off the collar. Let's do the left hand next. Hashtag bring back Bongo. So I think I'm just going to get a little bit more paint to glaze ratio here. Okay, let's look at the other hand. So this is like mostly paint with a little bit of glaze, so it's not quite full strength, which is kind of nice. Well, kind of nice, kind of a little bit frustrating sometimes because it's obviously not going to be full strength, so it could be a little bit transparent, a little streaky. As I said, I want to try to wrap up pretty soon, so I'm not going to labor over everything here. Let's just kind of continue plowing ahead. Let's go right down here. Interesting, a little bit of shadow under the jacket. I wouldn't do this normally, but let's follow the master. I guess that's a little bit of reflected light. Where did this come from? Ah! Let's see if it's too late to erase some of that. This line that I'm not sure where that came from. It could be have been there for a while. There we go. So that's just getting a cloth with just a little bit of water on it, wiping it away. And if you're fast, you can kind of take care of a little goof like that in the nick of time. I'll let that dry, and then we'll come back and attack it with a little bit more glaze. Just blend this in a bit more. Oops, can't see what I'm doing there, sorry. Just tiny little subtle hints here and there, right? So let's come back up. What else did I want to do up here on the head? Keep that like that. Let's go back to these fingers. So you can see I've just sort of darkened, or sorry, lightened this thumb a little bit. Just, I mean, you can see there's a little bit brighter edge in there. I could do that as well. Both it's sort of 1/2 dozen or 12 of the other, right? I think I'm just going to keep it like that. Let's just go to the other hand. Was it, what is, did I just mix up that analogy? What did I say? 1/2 dozen or 12 of the other, or 6 of the other, right? I just want to get this knee a little bit brighter here. Taking a bit of glaze. This may be a pretty heavy amount. I shouldn't have put that much on. Let that dry while it's drying. I'll solve that shortly. Sort of racing a little bit here. These little details. Maybe instead of trying to lighten that, let's go a little bit back to the darker color. Potentially, now I'm taking a darker color again. This darker brown that I was glazing with, I'm just going to come in between the toes a little bit here. Okay, so now I'm just taking the darker color. I'm just kind of coming, so I'm kind of going back and forth between dark and light. And this dark brown. Inside the jacket here. Ah, I did this again. Got paint around. So having a little cloth handy that you can wipe away little bits of paint that are sure to wind up all over the place is very helpful. Okay. Go back to the other hand. Actually, this jacket here. So I'm not necessarily following the original here. I'm just painting what my instincts tell me the painting needs. So you have to forgive me if you're looking at it going like, well, that's not really what's there. At some point I just really honestly stopped looking at the original. I'm just looking at mine, thinking what my painting needs. Because after all, that's at some point that's all there is, right? Unless I plan to hang a photocopy or a print of the original right next to it, which I'm not going to, but I guess could be kind of interesting. Or, you know, maybe if people came over, you said, well, here's what the original looked like, and you could bring it up on your phone. And okay. Oh, dark line. Let's go. One thing we haven't looked at is the seat and wheel. And take some brown. Oops. Darken that out. Actually, I'll take. So I'm just taking some brown, the same brown I used for this area here. You know what? I'm going to use purple or something for that, because that's not going to look all that hot. Okay. Maybe I can take a bit of brown and warm yellow, if I got any left, and just go over this. So this color was pretty dry on my palette, that's why it's not really behaving that well. Okay, let's do gray. We'll go back into some gray. Just let me see, can I get away with this yellow glaze? You know what, I should blow, my instinct says you should blow dry it before you do anything to this knee here, which needs a little bit of work. So listen to that voice, Michael, because every time I don't, I get myself in trouble. It's an interesting story. Deborah's talking about her son and the animation business and now doing web design. It makes me really happy to hear that your son is really happy to know that you're painting. That is awesome. So I'm taking the glazing fluid. I just want to soften this edge on the knee a little bit. I might have to do a couple glazes here. Okay. Another quick layer. Blow dry. think that's pretty good. I might have gone a little bit overboard there. Oops. Not bad. I think I just trying to integrate a little bit more of this brighter glaze. Yeah. Okay. So I want to put, almost done here. I guess gray stripe sides, like a little bit of detailing. So in fact, I'm going to set a timer here. Wow, tons of text messages. What's going on? We'll check that out. I'm going to set a timer for 20 minutes. We'll be done in 20 minutes, guaranteed. So, I'm going to put a little bit of white where I want the stripes on the jacket to go. And I just splattered water. Did that go on the surface of the painting? As I've done a few times. Let's just take some white. This white's been there the whole time, so it's not going to be the easiest to paint with, but it'll work. So I'm going to paint that white, and then I'll let it dry, and then paint yellow over it, and that would have saved me probably 10 minutes of goofing around otherwise. Maybe even, I'm just gonna put a little bit of white up here and clean this area up by the hat, where it felt like maybe a little bit sloppy. So because I'm gonna paint all that yellow, it's just gonna fit in there quite nice. Won't notice the difference. Same thing anywhere else that might need just a little bit of extra love there. And maybe even take this just as a highlight on there. Oh, I keep forgetting to put the red on the tongue. Let's do that while we're right here. Let's take just some warm red right out of the tube. Okay, let's get the gray on the feet done. So let's take some warm red, warm or cool blue, mix this up. We're going to make a lot more of this in a moment, but Let's move this over here, take some cool yellow. We're going to create a gray. Okay, so this gray will work down here, so let's just put a bit of glazing fluid on it. So let's just get the rest of that paint off. And tire, get my glazing fluid on here. Right, I can just paint that in and then just sort of soften that edge a little bit with my mop brush. And maybe that's too much. That's okay, we'll let that dry for a moment. I could actually, let's blow dry it and then I'll just fix. Okay. I could work on that more, but I think I'm happy with it. I'm happy. I could move on from that. So just get a bit of shadow. Let's get a bit more. Tire. I guess that's, you know what? I can take the same color and just darken the green. You know what? That should be purple, ideally. So let's get a rag and just wipe it away. Okay. Let's put the yellow on the arms. So, which yellow should I use? This is our warm yellow. Let me see, can I use any of this warm yellow from the very, very beginning? Remember, this is the color we put on the painting as our very first layer. There's water in there, so it's probably going to be a little bit thin. But as that water evaporates, it should be fine again. So that makes me happy to use that paint that's just been sitting there that would otherwise go in the garbage. I just covered right up that white that was in there. And I give a nice clean line. Some blue on the on his bow. So I'm going to use some blue to do that. I'm going to take some warm blue. The only color it looks like we haven't used is the cool red. So if you're keeping track, we're thinking about doing this painting, it's the only color I haven't used. Almost on the, I guess we could do more work on the bow tie here. But I will see. I might be okay with just leaving it like that. We could put little highlights on it, maybe if we have time at the very, very end. Let's see, the wheel at the bottom. I've got 8 minutes left on my clock here. So let's take a little bit of white, mix it in with this warm blue, just to get a bit of a highlight in here. Let's do the same thing coming up to the bow tie. Just take that same color. Just little bits. Okay, so let's do some outlining and then we're pretty much done, right? Am I thinking correctly? So to do my outlining, I'm just going to take some warm red. Let's mix a bit more of this here in warm blue. It's a nice dark color. And you could just deal with this. Maybe I'll just take a bit of my warm red and put that in here, just to give it a bit more of a. I usually use cold yellow, or sorry, so I put cold. So this is blah blah blah. This is cold blue and warm red mixed together, and we get this really nice dark color. I usually use cool yellow, but I'm out of cool yellow, and I just want to rather than squeezing a little bit more on. I just put a bit of warm yellow. Not quite the exact same thing, but good enough, right? It's, and especially since I'm not doing big flat areas of color, I don't mind. Okay, so let's go down here and start our final finishing touches. So, where are these big eyebrows up here? We could outline the entire eye, and that would also work too, but I think, like, just looking at the original, they've only sort of gone halfway around, which I think also works too. It's, maybe, and I should, you know, probably doing this with brown might make more sense than using my darkest color. But since I'm at the end of the painting and I'm in a rush, I'm just going to cut a tiny little corner that no one but me cares about. Oops, I keep moving this over when I move that over. There we go. Kind of a thick line unintentionally, but maybe I might do some of those lines with a little bit not quite as intense dark colors as this. Like, it's just amazing how these little lines like that just like make everything pop. Yeah, I'll do that with a lighter color. That's going to be too intense. But we can do inside this mouth, this dark. A line on the tongue, that helps. Let's go underneath the bow tie a little bit, darken that. I'm also just gonna bring that line up. There's not the way that they did it. He did it. I'm gonna take this line and just go in there like that. Inside the sleeve. under here, get this nice and dark. What did I say? A minute and a half. Okay, that's, I don't know if that'll happen. I guaranteed it, but I don't know. I should have done that. I just really wanted to be done before the 3-hour mark, but if a painting takes longer because you're enjoying yourself and it's turning out well, then that's a good thing. Not a reason to punish yourself over, so. Okay. Maybe in the collar, you know what, I'll save that for a second. Let's do this line going across here. Now again, I could use my acrylic pen, and that would make my life a lot easier, but nobody starts painting because they want life to be easy, right? If I wanted to spend my life in an easy way, there's plenty of other things that I would do rather than paint every day. Which is why I admire anyone who's painting along with me. You know, there's lots of other content out on YouTube. There's lots of content on Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu and every company's got an online service now. So much to keep you busy. And so the fact that there's so many of you that are out there painting along is just like the most exciting thing to me personally. Oops, let's put this here. I think I'll continue that line going out there once I deal with the stuff on the side, which is going to happen in just a moment. So as promised, I want to I don't like how intensely dark this line is for doing any small details. So like these little lines on the face, I'd prefer to take a bit of brown, if I have any that's not totally dry, and add a bit of the darker color to it. So it's not totally dark, not as dark as the ones around it, but approaching it. So Okay. Don't know if I needed to put that line there, but it's there now, and it's okay. Maybe continuing with this, a little bit more of a brown color. And I guess his collar, right? So I'll just come back in here with this gray that I could have used earlier. I just totally spaced out on it. Ay, ay, ay. Okay, let's blend it out, and then we'll just... Conversely, let's take a bit of white. I need to glaze with that. Take a little bit of glazing fluid and a little bit of white. It's not quite so intense and strong. Right on the nose. And anything else? Can I say that I'm done? I'm sure there's something here glaring problem that I can't see. I think I got it. Oh, I was gonna do this. Okay. Let's back out. The sides. I think we just need to do a little bit more love on the sides there. My mom says, I think this should be my Christmas present. That's a good idea. Okay, so I'm gonna take this warm blue and just do another pass on here. Maybe not all the way up to the edge, just kind of stay in the corners. If anything, what is this? Oh, there's some orange in there. When you get to the end of the palette, sometimes it gets pretty muddy, right? I guess it looks actually pretty good on my side. On camera, I don't like the way it looks, that dark blue. I'm going to blow dry it, and I think I'm going to add even a little bit more dark blue. Even though it's not, again, it looks not that pleasant on camera, but I think this is pretty good. So we'll just meet. Take some more. Actually, this time I would take a bit of this warm blue. I'm going to take a bit of my dark color that I had mixed earlier. So let's just kind of darken this dark blue, especially towards the outer. Yeah, there we go. That's good. I'm going to blow dry this, and then I'm going to just... Actually, can I touch this up? Is it too late? See, got some white in there. Ah! Okay, I think the last thing I'm going to do is just continue this line from the tightrope, but I'm going to, just like the original, I'm going to include just a cold blue with white here. Let's see, do I got any white left on here? Here I do, a little bit of it. Okay. So, I'm just gonna, what I like to do is maybe put something down next to it to act as like a guide. little bit wide at the bottom of that line. I could just clean it up a little bit, but since this is still wet, looks like I'm already causing a problem for myself, so that might just be the universe saying, Michael, you're done. You guys are awesome people. I love it. I love the compliments on the music. Is one of my dearest friends of all time, my good friend Sam Davidson. He was one of the groomsmen at my wedding. We've collaborated many times together. I designed record album covers for him and all sorts of stuff, so he's a great guy. Can I walk away from... Oh, you know... One second, Michael. Where's a brown? Let's take this little bit of brown. Just noticing... I'm gonna go the other way too. I need a darker color to do that. I think that's okay. I think if I walked away from here, I'm not going to get arrested for crimes against painting. I do just want to take... Here's my little bit of purple that I was wanting to use earlier. Finally use a bit of my cool red. It needs to be just a little bit thicker. So purple is a great color for darkening reds. That's cool. I haven't really been able to look at... It's funny, like sometimes I'm so into the painting I don't even see the full painting, and then you look at it and you're like, yeah, actually that's pretty good. So let's start the cleanup process here. I hope today's episode's been helpful, and if you've painted along with me, I would love to see how yours turned out. And if it didn't turn out like mine, that's arguably an even better reason to upload it to the Facebook group, because in a few weeks I'll take a look at all the art on the Facebook group and give feedback. It's all free. So if you want to take advantage of that, I encourage you to participate in the Facebook group, upload your version, and you know, most paintings that I see on there are awesome. And sometimes it's like, what? There's somebody's like, something's wrong with this painting. What is wrong with the painting? And I can use a little bit of my experience to help you. So oops, Bongo the bear. And I think this is the 1947, right? When the film was released. Today is incidentally the anniversary of the film's release. September 27th, 1947 is when this movie, Fancy, Fun, and Free, was hit theaters. And then the book was published probably just like today. McDonald's has the action figures out. They did it back then as they're doing it today. So it was kind of a tie-in for the film. I don't think it achieved the success that Disney was hoping for. So that's why we never saw another Bongo ever again. Although, like Lolly, I think it was Lolly posted there, bring back Bongo. Maybe there'll be a sudden surge in Bongo-related people dressing up as Bongo for Halloween, and you never know. The internet is a strange place, and stranger things have happened, but okay, just gotta walk away and go and play with the kid. So thank you everyone for joining me, for painting along with me again today. Again, upload your picture to the Facebook group. Please like and subscribe if you're just joining me now, or maybe you're just jumped to the end and you wanted to take a look at how it turned out. What do you think? All right, there's the original. There's the one I did side by side. Just over 3 hours to get it done, especially if you minus out all the blabber that I do. But I think that's pretty good. Obviously, a few little differences here and there. If you want to leave a donation, there's the PayPal link in the description below. If you want to send a check or email, transfer, contact me through the Facebook group or through my website, and those links are down below. Another great way to support your local YouTuber is just not skipping the ads at the beginning, middle, or end of a video. I know sometimes it can be annoying, but if you don't have an extra penny to spare, just letting the ad run helps us. So thank you so much for helping to support the work that I'm doing here. So we'll see you in tomorrow. It's a couple days. Today's Monday, the week just started. So we're going to be looking at Fernando Botero tomorrow, one of the great artists from South America, arguably one of the best, for sure. Certainly one of the most well-known. Yeah, so we'll talk about him tomorrow. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again, and enjoy the rest of your evening or morning, afternoon, wherever you are on our beautiful planet. Thank you, Mom. Love you, and I don't know, maybe you've got a Christmas present already. We'll see you soon, everybody. Bye, Mom. We'll see you soon. Good night, everyone.